Mm.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of God Yay or Nay. Today we got from the author of The Atheist Muslim, Ali Rizvi. Ali, thanks for joining us, man.
It's a pleasure, Noor. Thank you.
Hey buddy, so I have to say your book was such an influential book in my life. I loved it so much. Can you give our audience a little bit of a background, man, of where you come from? I know you were raised in Saudi Arabia, did school out in Pakistan, so maybe just a little bit of a background for our audience.
Yeah, man. I was born in Pakistan a long time ago in the 70s. I'm an old man. And then after that, I think when I was like 6 or 7 months old, we moved to Tripoli, Libya. So I grew up partially in Libya, and then I grew up mostly in Saudi Arabia. Went to school there, went to high school there, and then I went back to Pakistan where I went to medical school, and then after that, when I was 24, I came to Canada. So uh, for 24 years of my life, I was in Libya, Saudi Arabia, and Pakistan. Those three countries. And what that does is you're on. It's very very different cultures. Those are all of those countries are Muslim majority countries, but they're culturally very different. So you see a lot of interplay of languages and religions and the way that people live. So you naturally develop an interest in international issues, politics, the way that people relate to each other, how everybody thinks that their belief is the right one, and you get a sort of bird's eye view of how everything works, all of these sort of social political dynamics, and I just became very interested in that. And then when I came to Canada, I moved here finally, I think in 1999, and later, after 9/11 happened, a lot of things I'd grown up with, suddenly they were out in the mainstream, they're in the headlines, and everybody was talking about things from their own point of view. And I was like, well, maybe I have a perspective here to share that other people aren't looking at, and that's how I got into writing. And first I started writing blogs, then op-eds, and eventually ended up writing the book.
Yeah, no
Yeah.
kidding. And like how you were saying your perspective, you do have like a unique perspective that when I started following you, maybe in like 2015-ish, I noticed
Mhm.
that your perspective was one that wasn't really out there. Like we had like almost two different sides of the story, especially when it came like that was when like ISIS was on the rise and like that whole Islam was just kind of central news, right? And yeah, there was like two different sides of the story that you got almost from like right wing politics to left wing politics, and you had something kind of sorted down the middle. I don't know if you want to explain a little bit of that.
Yeah, so that's I just noticed that every time the topic of um, you had it became a politicized thing. Like, everything is left and right. Now you have this coronavirus. Even that is a polarized issue, which is absolutely insane. Like, I don't understand how that happens. But what happened was on the left. The people were and I lean left liberal, but um, this was my side, and this particularly bothered me that they thought that okay, any criticism you have of Islam means you're a bigot against all Muslims.
Hmm.
So anything you question about the religion, anything that you find problematic about the religion, that means that all you think that all Muslims are bad. Now, on the other hand, on the right, you have this idea that well, a bunch of Muslims they do terrible things. That means that all Muslims must be profiled. They must be banned. They must be surveilled. There's a whole sort of outright bigotry, actual bigotry issue on the right, and I thought that there was a middle ground. The middle ground was that there's a difference between Islam, which is an idea, right? It's a set of beliefs in a book, and Muslims who are people, right? So Islam is an ideology. Muslim is kind of an identity. It's a
Hmm.
personal identity. So um, what happens is that when you criticize Islam or you say that okay, there's a verse in the Quran that says that you can beat your wife. Well, I have a problem with that. You say that. You're not saying that that means all Muslims are wife beaters. You're not like using a blanket statement against a whole group of people. What you're doing is you're criticizing ideas, and ideas don't have rights. Ideas don't have feelings. Ideas are not necessarily entitled to respect. And it's we challenge our ideas. That's how we move forward. Islam itself was a challenge of the status quo. So I
Ha
tell
ha
people,
ha ha ha.
I like just follow Sunnah. I mean, if you're gonna what I'm doing, and they're like, why are you criticizing Islam so much? It's blasphemous. I'm like, well, it's Sunnah. That's what the Prophet Muhammad apparently did, is that he challenged all of the religious people around him. He was the biggest blasphemer of all to the
Yeah,
Quran.
that's true.
And so I'm just following his example, man. That's all I'm doing.
Oh, that's an interesting way to
That's
put it.
it. Yeah.
Uh, yeah, actually, the whole separation of identity and ideology, that was actually one thing that it really resonated with me, I think. Especially, like, I don't know, I wouldn't consider myself really an atheist, but I definitely won't, I'm not really much of a believer in religion too much. And,
Right.
but I can't escape the whole Muslim identity, eh? Like, that's always going to be with me. Even if I tell my friends, like, yeah, I don't really believe in anything, I'm still their Muslim friend, right?
Yeah. And that's the thing. When people say, well, how could you make the separation because Muslims isn't a Muslim somebody who believes in Islam? I'm like, yeah, 1400 years ago, that was a definition. But now, when Gallup does its polls, or Pew Research, they do their polls and they say in 2050, Muslims will be the largest religious group in the world. They make that projection. How do they know? Like, who are they talking about? Are they talking about people who convert to Islam? Are they talking? No, they're talking about kids born in Muslim families. They're looking at growth rates, which is what you do for an identity. Now, there's no such thing as a Muslim baby. I mean, there are many. Every former Muslim I know, every Muslim I know who became an agnostic or became an atheist, they all had Muslim parents.
Mm.
So they're not necessarily accounting for that. Like when Donald Trump says that, okay, we're going to ban immigration from like 7 or 8 Muslim countries or Muslim majority countries, right? There are millions of people in those countries who don't believe in anything, who are not religious Muslims. But he's using the term Muslim as an identity, and I think that is, there are many Muslims who've never read the Quran. They don't know anything about Islam. They don't know anything, but they call themselves Muslim because their parents are Muslim. They came from a Muslim family. That's the case for the vast majority of Muslims. So Muslim has become kind of a birth identity in a way. So it's and that brings up a lot of dynamics. It's interesting when people say, well, criticizing Islam isn't racism. Well, when you demonize Muslims, well, that can be a kind of bigotry. So all of those conversations become very relevant when you think about it that way. And I'll give you an example of how this really plays out. There's a big conversation about hijab and burqa nowadays, right?
Yeah.
So hijab is a head covering that a lot of Muslim women wear for modesty reasons. A controversial thing, but there's a lot of young women I know, and I have corresponded with, who wear the hijab, and they don't like it. Their parents made them wear it when they grew up, and they've had this argument with their parents that, we don't want to wear it. Where in the Quran does it say clearly that you have to wear it? It's not a necessity. So they're having this sort of argument, this conversation with their parents internally within their Muslim families, because they don't want to wear it. They want to be normal like all the other high school, all their friends, and they want to do things with their hair, whatever it is. But then when someone like Donald Trump comes and says, okay, we're going to ban all Muslims entering the country, like he did in 2015 when he was running, when he says that, then suddenly all of these girls who wear the hijab, they say, no, screw you, I'm going to keep it on. Because then now it's become a symbol of identity,
Yeah.
right? Now they're becoming, so first it was an ideological, so was it a choice for them? It wasn't an ideological choice for them. But when it comes to their sense of identity, it becomes a choice. So these conversations are, I think that we tend to look at them in a very black and white way. But there is a lot of gray, there's a lot of nuances, a lot of other dynamics that are involved when people talk about these things.
No, that's a very interesting point you actually pointed out there. So I think like a lot about your book and stuff is like you want to see like some sort of secularization come to Islam. Is that true?
Yeah, I mean, secularization, I think, you got to remember what secular is. Secularism means that it's just a separation of religion and state.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so in most Western countries now, you have
We have that. Yeah.
separation of religion and state. Religion has its own sphere, and it's not involved in politics. And this is the best way to ensure freedom of expression for everybody, and it's also the best way to ensure religious freedom.
Yeah.
If you're in a secular society, Yeah, exactly. So you can express whatever your religion is. You can practice your religion freely. It's the best way to do it. So I think that in a lot of Muslim majority countries, yeah, I absolutely think I think that there would be a lot of progress. It'd be much better if the affairs of the religion were separate from the affairs of the state.
Okay, so from you being from a lot of those countries, and I assume you know a lot of people who actually promote these ideas. Like, can you tell us, like, do you do you have an optimistic vision of the future when it comes to like secularization in these countries?
Yeah, I think I am actually optimistic based on what I've seen since I started doing this work, and also before that. If you look at the trajectory in the last just 30 years, I think it was just a little over 30 years ago that Salman Rushdie wrote a book, and he had to go into hiding for 10 years. Okay.
Amazing book.
Yeah, yeah. And then, as recently as 2006, as recently as 2015, you had people who were murdered for making cartoons of the Prophet Muhammad. Now it's become normalized. Like if you look at it, I'm talking to you, we're having this conversation openly. There are so many people from the Muslim world who publicly identify as atheists, including public personalities like Aziz Ansari, for instance,
Yep.
right? Especially in the comedy community. So,
Yeah, yeah.
it's a big thing. People are just more open about it. There are more conferences. There are more sort of people from the Muslim world who are speaking up about it. So, and there are numbers to it. So, Gallup did a poll, I think in 2012, 2013, almost 10 years ago, where they found, when they did a study of religiosity around the world, and they found that in Saudi Arabia, remember, Saudi Arabia is a birthplace of Islam.
Yeah,
That's
no kidding.
where Muslims face every day when they pray. So over here in Saudi Arabia, it's a country of about 26 million people, I think. 5% of respondents said that they are convinced atheists, but confirmed atheists. So not just non-religious. 19% of Saudis said that they were non-religious, and 5% said that they were atheists. Now, to put that in perspective, in Italy, same question in Italy, 15% said that they were non-religious.
Oh, wow.
A higher percentage in Saudi Arabia that are non-religious than in Italy. And the number of confirmed atheists, 5% is the same as it is in the US. There was another poll done by a Kurdish polling agency called AK News in Iraq that showed that 7% of people in Iraq identified as atheists. So that is between Iraq and Saudi Arabia alone. That's about 3.5 million people who said that they were atheists, and they reported this in a place, and it's probably underreported because people don't like to say that, first of all. And it is, I mean, these are astounding numbers, and this is almost 10 years ago. So I think that just the idea of, and I'm not saying everybody has to be an atheist, but the idea of secularization and challenging ideas of religion, this has been it has really, sort of exponentially grown, especially since the internet, since social media. When I was growing up in Saudi Arabia, we didn't have access to anything, right? We didn't. All of the magazines were censored.
Hmm.
They like I remember when, and I've told the story before in other places, is that when they shot Malcolm X, the movie with Denzel Washington.
Yeah.
So Denzel Washington and Spike Lee, they came to Mecca to shoot in the city of Mecca. Now, non-Muslims are not allowed in Mecca, but the Saudis allowed them in, and we didn't hear of it. We had no idea. We were living in Saudi Arabia. We had no idea. Then I went to Pakistan for the summer, and then I saw over there that Malcolm X had been shot in Mecca, and we just hadn't received that news at all because they just didn't put out the.
Oh, wow.
So this is before the internet. You can't hide things like that anymore. The people there who have been in that kind of closed society, who had no idea what was going on outside the world, now have a sort of a portal to the outside world. They're learning about other people with other ideas, and it's amazing. It's kind of what the printing press did with Christianity, back in the Dark Ages.
Yeah.
The same, the internet is sort of doing that with the Muslim world, especially Muslim youth.
Oh, that's so cool.
So I'm optimistic. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's the answer.
Yeah, that's a great answer. Honestly, I didn't like even some of those Gallup polls you were telling me about. I've never heard those ones, so those numbers
Hmm.
surprised me as well. That's
Yeah.
actually yeah, no, I'm actually really happy with those numbers. So can you tell me a little bit about Saudi Arabia, like growing up there? Because I find Saudi Arabia so interesting. Like when the more you hear about it, but like even now I'm kind of understanding that a lot of what I hear is just media. So I might just be like hearing a lot of like just biases and stuff. So maybe you can give us a
Yeah.
little idea of what it was like growing up there.
Yeah, it was weird because like they when people covered it in here, when they wrote about Saudi Arabia in the West, it was always thought of as this moderate country. Well, Saudi Arabia is moderate, but you know, Iraq is the fanatical country, right? That's how they said that Iraq was a problem with Saudi Arabia. But it was exactly the opposite. Saudi Arabia is essentially like the Taliban with a lot of money,
Okay.
right? So it I don't even know where to start. So everything that you hear about women is true, and it's probably worse. Men over there typically have multiple wives. This is again when I was living there. The women have to be covered. They have to at least have their hair covered when they go out in public. They're not allowed to go out without their hair covered. Now women are beginning to drive there. At that time, women were not allowed to drive, and so we always had to get other transport. For example, my mother was a professor, a university professor, and a teacher, and she had to be driven to work by men who didn't even have close to the education level that she had. So it's because she had to be apparently taken care of. So
Yeah.
that was one of the situations. There's a lot of an Arab superiority issue. I mean, the state is it's state-sponsored racism in a sense. My father was a professor and he taught at the King Saud University in Riyadh. He had a Pakistani passport, so the people who had American passports, like the Americans, would get paid for doing the exact same job, about twice what he did. Um, so they used to give you your salary based on what your nationality is.
Oh wow.
So the Bangladeshis, the Filipinos, the Pakistanis, Indians, they would get a lower salary. The Americans, the Europeans would get higher salary for the exact same job, and then the Saudis would obviously get the most. So there's I mean, those are just some of the things.
Yeah.
Uh, it was very secure. Like people would not. I mean, it wasn't secure in other ways, but in terms of bodily security, nobody would really rob you because if someone robbed you, they'd get their hand cut off.
Yeah.
In the center of Riyadh, there was a marketplace, an old marketplace. In the middle of that, there was a big square that we called Chop Chop Square. You can look it up online. So everybody called it Chop Chop Square, and that's where they had the public beheadings. So everything from people accused of, well, people convicted of murder, convicted in quotes because they never really had a proper justice or trial system. If you killed somebody, you get your head cut off. If you dealt drugs, you get your head cut off. Sorcery, if they thought that you were guilty of sorcery or
Sorcery.
witchcraft. Oh yeah, there were people there who've been had their heads cut off for sorcery. They would do, just the whole place was. When we were growing up there, we were relatively sheltered from it because we were foreigners, and I was a kid, frankly. So I didn't have
Did you
too much
ever
at stake.
see a public beheading?
Oh man, no, but we got close. When they do that, they don't announce it. A lot of times, what the Saudis do is that they take the foreigners, anybody who's a foreigner in the market, they'll kind of push them up front so they can see because they want to show them. Um,
Holy.
People will throw things, or they will spit there, and but I no, they just moved me away, and I never ended up getting caught in that. Fortunately, my parents were very protective of us, and to the extent that my parents were professors, they were religious, but they would ask us, they're like, can you, if we ask questions about the religion, they're like, why are we doing this? Is this right? If we had any doubts or skepticism, they welcome the questioning, but they tell us, make sure you don't say this to anybody else. Make sure
Oh
you don't.
wow.
So, because if I told somebody and that friend told their father and that father reported them, then they'd basically take my father away. So,
Oh, it was that bad.
yeah, it was really, I mean, it was really crazy. the good things, I mean, I guess good relatively, was that just a lot of the myths about it. That there's no, I mean, there were stores where you could get CDs and tapes and music. You didn't have, there were no cinemas there. There were no public concerts, nothing like that. You couldn't do anything like that. But you could do it in private. There is no religious freedom, so you can't wear a cross. If you wear a cross and you're Christian, you're not allowed to do that. There were no churches. There are no, there are only Sunni mosques. If you're Shia, then you have to hide and do all your stuff in the house. You can't be caught because sometimes it would raid you. Yeah, so a lot of things like that. Everything you hear about it, the bad stuff is pretty much
Yeah,
true.
it's pretty much
Exactly
bang
what it
on.
is.
Yeah, yeah. Well, like I heard a lot of
And
those
it's even
kind of
worse.
stories, and yeah, you the way you're describing it, I'm like, holy shit, man.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So,
It's
when you were growing up there, like, you were saying you questioned religion a little bit growing up. Were you ever like at all that religious, or did religion ever take a hold of you?
I went in and out of it. So yeah, when I was a kid, I was sort of liberally religious. I was never a sort of fundamentalist. So I basically listened to my parents, what they were. They were sort of more progressive and liberal, educated religion Muslims. So I was kind of like that. I did learn how to read the Quran. I liked all the rituals. I loved the Ramadan, all of
Yeah,
the iftaris and the food and Eid, and I used to be really involved in those celebrations. I still am actually.
yeah,
I'm still,
yeah, yeah.
um, and then, but in terms of belief, yes, I believe there were times. I used to pray. I used to try to get into it, but I always used to try to make sense of it in some way. So there are times I was very skeptical. Other times I weren't. My younger brother, I think from the age of 8, he just saw all this stuff and he thought, well, maybe it's something that grown-ups do. He's like, it doesn't make any sense to me, but I guess when I'm older, maybe I'll believe in it. That's what he used to think. And turned out that he was right. So yeah, so I dabbled in it. I tried to justify it. I used to look at the. My problem was they used to tell me that the Quran. They used to talk about the Quran. Then I read the Quran, so I was the only one I knew who read it. My dad hadn't read it. My mother hadn't read it. And I couldn't go online. There was no online. So I used to get these paperbacks and I used to read it and I used to find all this weird stuff in there. I'd ask my parents. They'd never have any answers for me. So it was it started seeding some doubt in there. I think I was always somewhat skeptical.
Okay, so that's kind of where your questioning started to begin when you actually read the Quran.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
a good place to start the questioning,
Uh,
right?
it actually started, I think, when I was 5, and I wrote about this in the book that I had a younger cousin who was 3 years old, and she had leukemia, childhood leukemia, which at that time didn't really have a cure. And when she was dying, they brought her in the room, and this was in England. We were all there, and I was standing with my dad, and it was a terrible scene because this 3-year-old is dying of cancer, and cancer pain. Even 80-year-olds get, it's torturous for them.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
it's the same kind of thing in a 3-year-old, and she's gasping and she's in agony. And I was watching that, and I remember it very clearly. And I asked my father, I was like, "What's happening?" And my father said, "Oh God, Allah is taking her back. He's taking her away." So I looked at it, I was like, "Wow, this is pretty bad. Why is he doing that?" And then I saw her mother and my mom, reading the Quran by her side and crying. And I said, what are they doing? They're praying to Allah. They're saying, please don't take her away.
Mm.
I'm thinking, well, who is this Allah guy? Like, why doesn't he? Either you can end it really quick, like this 3-year-old kid, or they're like, why? What's with this tug of war? It's like, and it just seemed like I was like, this guy is a sadist. Like,
Yeah, yeah.
that was my first impression. That was my very first impression of God. Later on, I found out I was like, oh, he's apparently good. Okay, all right, okay. And I tried to, but then everything, everything I saw from then, I used to think, when Ziaul Haq, the president of Pakistan, died in a crash, a plane explosion in 1988.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Are you originally Pakistani, Indian, or?
Pakistani, yeah. I don't
Yeah.
know that story. That's a little before my time.
So
I,
where?
I'm from, I was born in Calgary, but yeah, my dad's Pakistani.
So where did you live in? Where was your dad from in Pakistan?
Lahore. And
Oh, she's
yeah,
awesome.
Lahore and Karachi.
Yeah, it's the same city. Yeah. So 1988, like this guy, he dies in an explosion in a crash, and they say, well, there's a miracle. A miracle happened. What's a miracle? There was a little copy of the Quran that was untouched. It survived in the plane. And I was thinking, so everybody was talking about it like it's this huge miracle. And I'm thinking there are 32 people who died on that plane.
Oh wow.
Got exploded, but God decided to save a book. I'm like, it sounds like a lot like that original Allah that I thought of when I was 5. It just didn't. It did a lot of it didn't make sense. So
I actually, you know what? The way you describe that, it reminds me of like the exact same way I first questioned religion. It was at a mosque when I was younger, and I remember my dad was talking to somebody who just lost his job, just going through a horrible time. But I remember the guy was just saying, "Well, oh, this is Allah's will. This is Allah's will," like, and all that stuff. And I just kept thinking to myself, like, what are you talking about? Like, your life's in the dumps right now. Like, just stop saying that and go do something about it. Like, I don't know. That's
yeah,
not how my like younger self kind of thought about it. But it is kind of funny how like kids can actually sometimes like see through religion just by like they almost just think completely logically just by looking at it, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah. It
Um,
is. I think it's very obvious a lot of times. Like there's this, you're saying you're praying before you eat. You're like, oh, thank you, God, for giving us all this food. And
mhm.
God's like, oh, that's not. I'll say you're welcome, but first let me go and give all of these kids in Africa cancer. And then I'll come to you. The whole priority system is just messed up. But
No, it is a little crazy. So like my podcast, I call it God Yay or Nay. So I usually ask that, but I'm pretty sure you're gonna give a nay if if I'm correct.
well, it's a complicated question. So I mean, it depends
It
what you mean
is.
by.
It is.
Yeah, it depends what you mean by God. When you talk about God as the theistic God who answers your prayers and intervenes in human affairs and blesses some people and all of that, that God it's a nay. I'm pretty certain of that. If you're talking about like a general sort of force in the universe and intelligence in the universe, or maybe even some sort of higher intelligence, something that we don't understand, that we can't comprehend, for that, or like a pantheistic type thing,
Yeah,
then
yeah.
I'd be agnostic about it. I'm like, okay, I'm 50-50.
Okay.
There could be.
Yeah, that was actually gonna be my next question. So like, do
Yeah.
you have a kind of a spiritual side to you at all? Like any kind of trying to find some greater meaning or anything?
My view is I'm a physician and a scientist by profession. I've been in this career for decades now, and I think that is the best. If you want, I tell my sort of little religious cousins, nieces, and nephews this as well, that if you want to study God, if you want to get close to God, supposing you believe in God, you want to get close to God. What are you going to do? You study His creation, right?
Mm-hmm.
What did He create? You look around. The Quran says, look around you, look at what God created. So you look around you, and that's nature. Nature is all around you. The universe is nature. All of that is nature, and you study it, and that has a name. The study of nature is called science,
Oh,
right?
okay.
And science is like if I want to know you better, like Noor Kitwai, I want to know who you are, and you're long gone, I can't see you. I'm going to read the books that you wrote. I'm going to look at the comedy that you did and the
Mm-hmm.
stand-up routines. You might go to your room and see what you left, what kind of things you like. That's how I'm going to get to know you, right? So this is a study of nature is called science. And what is the language of that? Language of nature isn't Arabic. It's not Aramaic. It's not Hebrew. It's not Greek. The language of nature is mathematics, right?
Mm-hmm.
That mathematics, it doesn't change wherever you are. It's a universal language. It works everywhere. It's intuitive. Everybody understands it. So for me, the spiritual things, the things I want to know, if you want to call it spiritual, it's just these transcendent experiences. When I was younger, I would look up at the sky, and I remember being stunned. I was stunned for months when I found out that I was looking at the sky. I wasn't just looking in the distance, but I was looking back in time, right? Because all of those stars some of them are millions of light years away, So I'm actually looking at them the way they looked millions of years ago, because light hadn't gotten in my eyes yet. That's something that totally blew my mind. So everything could be completely different now, but I'm looking at it at a time when it was when humanity, nobody existed as we knew it, and so just the idea that we're looking back in time and looking at the sky. I'd look at the moon. I think, wow, we've been there. That's amazing. And these experiences in life, when you listen to music, you listen to a really good qawwali. I know that's counterintuitive, but you know, you listen to a nice sort of blasphemous Urdu qawwali like Ye Halka Halka Surur by Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan, or something like that, and it just takes you to this place, and you're so that to me is a spiritual transcendent experience. If I'm with my daughter, and my daughter wakes me up in the morning, and we sit and we talk, and we're just spending time with her. That to me is a transcended. She's 3 years old, and it's one of my favorite times of the day. And for me, that is something well beyond. It's something I try to understand, like the love between a father and his children. These things feel intangible to me, but I think there's so much spiritual fulfillment, and a beautiful movie, a beautiful painting, music, being in love with somebody, studying how embryology works, or science, learning about theoretical physics, like all of these things there's so many transcendental spiritual experiences in natural life that I've never really felt like I have to go beyond it. Like that's more than enough.
Hey,
You know?
I love that, and the whole idea of like saying your spirituality comes from experience. Like I'm kind of like on the same board as that, and yeah, no, I love
Right.
that, and that especially with science, how you said the whole feeling of awe, like I like that whole feeling of awe when you look at the sky, or when you're studying something. Like I think that's beautiful. My one of my favorite scientists, Carl Sagan, like how he always used to
Yeah.
talk so beautifully about the universe, and like he made it so poetic that you just listened to him, and it filled you up with this feeling where you were just yeah, you were motivated to learn more about the universe. And no, I love that answer, man. I also actually wanted to ask you this. So I hear like a lot of like let's say intellectuals and even philosophers from back in the day, they talk about how, since the whole idea of like, especially in the Western world, how they say like God is dead, and they say there's like a meaning crisis in the world, like where people are having now trouble because they don't have a god, which would something that would give them meaning. Do you think there's any kind of truth to this, that like people are having trouble finding meaning in life right now, that's why we see a lot of like maybe mental illness or depression, or we see a lot of like politics and like divisive like ideologies kind of popping up? Like, do you think there's any truth to that at all?
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of truth to it, and I think that there's an evolutionary truth to it. Oh, sorry, hold on. Oh, you're recording this, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, sorry about that. There's an evolutionary truth to it. So the way that human beings evolve, Homo sapiens, is that we evolve to have long-term memory. A lot of other species, lower species, they don't have long-term memory. They just have short-term memory. Um, and when you have a conscious sort of long-term memory, you immediately can start making goals. You can make goals. You could, based on past experience, you can make future things that you want to achieve, that you want to do. Not just in the short term, that I want to find a maid, I want to find food, I want to get, I'm hungry, I have to go to the bathroom. Not just that, but just long-term actualization goals. And when you do that, the whole idea of purpose and meaning is inherent in that. That's where our need for meaning comes from. So it is a consequence of us evolving to develop long-term memory, long-term and perspective. We have that capacity to prospectively make long-term goals. So um, it's very natural for people to want to find some kind of purpose, some kind of meaning in life. And a lot of times it doesn't make sense. Well, why am I doing this? Why am I here? What am I meant to do in life? And that is something that religion very adequately answered, like more than adequately. It tapped in on that immediately, okay, and it gave them a purpose. When
Mm-hmm.
people are sort of lost, they can find purpose in all kinds of things. People are so desperate for meaning. That's how, if you study how cults are formed, people join cults, even completely irrational cults. That's how it happens. Why do people join ISIS? A lot of times, even people who aren't that religious, they joined ISIS because it gave them purpose. It gave them a sense of identity, right? And something that some sense of meaning. So I think that is very important, and I should say this is one of the sort of things that we should be critical of ourselves in the skeptic community and in the atheist agnostic community, is that we don't do such a good job of that. We tend to think, oh, just rational ideas is going to work. You can't tell a mother who just lost her child to leukemia, to cancer, that, well, that's it. There's nothing else out there. Deal with it, because we have to deal with reality. You have to accept reality. You can't do that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's something. Reason and rationality are good and they're important, but human beings are not necessarily reasonable and rational people. We know that in
Yeah.
abundance,
Yeah.
right? So
100%.
there has to be something, and there are ways to tell stories. There are, like, what I'm talking about with spiritual fulfillment, the natural experiences you can have in life that give you that transcendental experience. And you can address that. In my book, in the last chapter, I talk about how a friend of mine wrote to me after her father died, and she said, and she's religious, she's Muslim, and she said, well, what do you do? If you're an atheist, what do you do? He's just in the ground and he's done. And then I really thought about it, and I said, this is an important question for people who are not religious and who are talking about this, to answer for people. That, what are you going to do? Are you going to give me, is there any comfort that I can get through the truth, through reality, through what we know? And there are several ways you can. There's many things that you can think of, but there are ways you can talk about this and provide that sense of meaning for people who are not religious. Right? But I think we need to put more effort into that.
Hey man, that's an amazing answer. Thanks, buddy. That's no, I honestly, that's especially that's always been my kind of criticism about atheism as well, is that it did seem to have like a lack of meaning, and I felt it didn't provide anything for people, and like the way you answered it, hey, that's beautiful, buddy.
Yeah, I'll tell you something. Like, when my father died, I think it was in 2001. It was a long time ago. I remember my uncle, my mother's oldest brother, was here, and he's always been sort of he was the atheist of the family. Like, everybody's praying, he's like, I don't want to pray. This is just. He's like, this is bullshit. What are you guys doing? He was very vocal about it. He was the oldest.
Hmm.
We're Pakistani, and you know what happens. The oldest person gets the respect, no matter what. So this guy, and then I asked him at the time, I was like, so am I going to see my dad again? How's he, what are you going to tell me as an atheist? If I'm religious and I'm looking forward to one day meeting him again in the afterlife, what are you going to tell me? And he just told me one thing. He's like, he's alive through you. He's like 50% of his genes, his essence, everything, his actual biological essence is living through you. He's still here. He's left it. And that completely changed everything. I don't know why. I have no idea why. But when I heard that, there was a tremendous amount of comfort in it. That, okay, well, he's always here. Like, I am his biological essence. It's me. I'm his genetic essence. It's so things like that, when and there are things like that we can think of that can be really, really profound and that are actually true. They're not just fairy tales, and they can provide a lot of meaning and a lot of comfort to people in these kinds of times.
Oh wow, yeah, that I've actually heard that too from parents. Like I don't have any kids, but I know like people when they say like when they look at their kids or when they did have kids, they can actually look at them and it does give you that kind of comfort, like almost like all right, like I don't want to die, but like if it happened, like something is like there's something like a little bit more complete in me now, right? Like
Yeah,
I know something's passing on or living after me about myself. That's
yeah, man. It's weird. It doesn't make complete sense. It feels, but there's something about it that feels. right. I haven't figured it out what it is, but it's there, and I think that it's the kind of thing that I think we can talk about a lot more.
Yeah, hey man, that's why I started this podcast. I want to kind of
Yeah, I
talk
love
about
it.
these things, and yeah, like I don't know, I kind of went a little bit. So when I went into university, I that's when I kind of went through my George Carlin,
Yeah.
Christopher Hitchens phase, and like I was like the hardcore atheist for about 5 years, and then after school, I kind of like yeah, I kind of came back and I was like, something was missing. I needed more, and that's where I kind of became a little bit more spiritual and kind of got into like meditation and stuff like that. That actually was kind of searching for more in an experience, and like how you were
Hmm.
talking about experience. That because I agree, like in a way, like I need to have some sort of experience for me to be like, okay, this is something I can put my belief into or my faith into. Like at least there's an experience there. I can't do it in like stories that I don't believe in or like shit like that. So
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, no, that's really cool. So when you seem like you come from a very like liberal family, then like did you ever have any issues then when you started coming out with this book and like when you started coming out as like an atheist? I bet like I can't
Oh
see
man.
that being too easy.
Oh, my parents actually also evolved as we grew up. When we were younger, I would say they were more conservative.
Mm,
Um, and as we grew older, they became a little bit more liberal and progressive, and a lot of that had to do with the kids growing up. They were, again, they're university professors, both of them, so they really encouraged us to engage them in dialogue. We could ask questions. Everything was we were always debating everything. The people would come to our house. They think, "Oh, these guys are fighting." We weren't fighting. Just having passionate arguments, and then after that, everybody would get along. So that's something that was very much a part of my family. So later on, when I started talking about all this stuff, that I'm not religious. What is this new challenging religion and all of that? It annoyed my mother, and it made her concerned for my security back at that time. uh, she didn't really discourage it. She didn't try to talk me out of it. She's like, "Oh, well, if you don't believe, you don't believe, but just don't annoy people all the time. You don't have to talk about it all the time." I was like, "Okay, I won't talk about it. I'll just start writing about it." And that really helped because once I started writing about it and I just putting my stuff out there, I didn't feel like I had to talk about it all the time. It didn't. I wasn't as angry. I felt like, okay, the ideas are out there, and I can focus on other things. I can talk to people about the kind of stuff they like to talk about, like barbecues and shoes and that other shit. So, so when I eventually started getting a bit of a following, and then when I had the book deal, then uh, my mom became very encouraging. She said, "This is great. Good luck on your book." I'm like, "Well, this is basically, you understand everything about all the stuff I said that used to annoy the shit out of you before is I'm just putting that in a book. So now you're going to have it, and everybody's going to read it, and everybody's going to be able to be annoyed." And but it didn't matter because now it was a book, so it was official. And the day that the book came out, my mom called me. She said, "Congratulations, your book was launched today, and you know, inshallah, it will do very well." So this is so my book, The Atheist Muslim, which completely, yeah, completely like excoriates religion and Islam and everything. She said, "Oh, inshallah, it'll do very well." And I told her, I was like, You should have told me this a month ago, and I would have put it on the cover of the
Yeah.
book. Been the
That's
cover, but
oh, that's amazing.
so yeah, they've been so it's been back and forth. I think my relationships with my friends have been more of a casualty. Sometimes, I did date religious people in the past, and
Mhm.
became a problem. I mean, one of the exes I had, she was liberal religious and everything, and then she talked about. We started getting serious, and she just brought up. She's like, "If you have a son, are you gonna circumcise him?" Because she said, "What would you if I want to raise the children religiously? Would you be okay with it?" And I said, "Yeah, oh, I don't care. I was raised religiously. Like eventually, he's gonna grow older and he's gonna come to me, and then I'll do my thing. It doesn't matter."
Classic
Yeah.
dad move right there.
exactly. It's like I'm not gonna lie to him about what I think. If he asks me questions, I'll tell him. And she's like, well, um, so you don't care I can raise a kid any way I want to? And I was like, yeah. And she's like, what about can I circumcise him? I said, no. I was like, that's torture. I don't want. There's no need for that. I mean, I'm a physician. I know this. It's medically unnecessary. He wants. I'm not. If he wants to get circumcised for religious reasons, when he's older, he can make that decision. It's like any surgery. You never do surgery on any other kind of surgery on a newborn, but that for any kind of preventative reason, hygiene reasons or preventing. You don't do surgery on them. So it's like I am not against if you want him to be circumcised, let him make the decision when he grows older. And then that became a sticking point. So those kinds of things, I mean, they're very rare, but sometimes those differences do show up and they cost you issues. I don't know, like but it doesn't really bother me. I think it bothers other people more.
Yeah. Did you ever like, because I'm assuming you probably got people sending you like bad messages and stuff like strangers and everything. Did that ever bother
Oh,
you, or do you just have a thick skin now?
no, I have a very, I am, look, anytime you're doing something different, and you have to know this ahead of time. If you get into this kind of work, or you're getting into activism, or trying to get some ideas out there that go against the grain, you have to know that the vast majority, initially, like the very first black man who went out there and said that I don't want to be segregated anymore. I want equal rights. The vast majority of white people and even many black people opposed him. So if he had Twitter, then he would be canceled. That's
Yeah.
all I'm saying. The very first feminist who said that, yeah, women should go outside of the house and they should work. Like, everybody, if she had Twitter, everybody would be saying hashtag, cancel her. Why is she saying that? The majority of people were against women voting, including women, right? So
Yeah. Yeah.
anytime you do something different, the vast majority of people are going to oppose you. The problem is with social media, that majority just hits you like a ton of bricks in your
Yeah.
notification, and you tend to then you're like, oh, I have to apologize. Maybe I have to look at their point of view. It's like, no, just ignore what people are saying and keep pushing on. Like, don't get distracted. If you think that what you're saying is right, yes, listen to constructive criticism, but don't listen to people who say, well, no, I'm really hurt by this. This is very offensive. Because guess what? Everybody in the past who brought any kind of revolutionary change in the history offended a lot of people, including Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ, why was he crucified? Because, as Christians believe, because he pissed off a lot of people. He offended a lot of people. Muhammad, he's chased out of Mecca, in fear of his death because he pissed off a lot of people. The very first Harvey Milk, the big gay rights activist back in the day, he was murdered. Martin Luther King Jr. murdered. I mean, these people offended everybody. But every revolution starts off as a rebellion. You can't have it any other way. So you have to have a thick skin. Yeah, have I gotten death threats? I have. Yes, like loads of them. Fortunately, not as many now, because I think things. That's another reason I'm optimistic, because I think things have changed. But in the past, like when I first started doing this, man, like loads and loads of death threats. Right? Then I had to get, when the book came out, I got a very sort of high tech security system for my house because I was about to have a child as well, and so these things you have to consider and you have to be careful about, but you have to remember what's at stake. The reason you do this is because I have a good friend of mine. His name is Raif Badawi. He is in prison in Saudi Arabia right now because he does exactly what I do. He writes, right? He wrote about not atheism. He wrote about secularism in Saudi Arabia, and they threw him in jail for apostasy. They sentenced him to 1,000 lashes. They actually did 50 of them, and then fortunately they stopped. And his wife and his kids, they live here in Canada. He hasn't seen them for 7 years because he's in jail, just because he wrote stuff on a website. Right? So
Wow.
these are, yeah, you have to have a thick skin. Like if he can deal with that, I think that I could probably deal with a few extra security measures.
Man,
Yeah.
that's yeah, that's very inspiring. Thanks for sharing that. Yeah, like how you compare to your friend in Saudi Arabia, and like you use him to actually give yourself some strength. I'll do the same, man, because like hey, I started this podcast, and even like with all the positive comments I got, like I do get some of that negativity coming back to me every once in
Yeah.
a while, and no, I'm gonna use your example, man, to like push through that. You got to believe in yourself, and you got to believe in what your cause is, and yeah,
Yep.
push through, man. Thanks for sharing that, and you did it in a very nice way.
Mm.
Yeah, so yeah, we're pretty much close to the end here. Do you want to do you have anything besides your book, The Atheist Muslim, that you want to promote?
No, not really. I can tell you, like, when I'm working on a new book. It's going to be a novel.
Oh,
Um,
sweet.
yeah, so it's also based on, I guess, the character in the Atheist Muslim would be me, but sort of modified, um, who goes on a sort of Da Vinci Code like journey
Nice.
to find out things. So it's like a sort of mystery thriller type, which means that we're plotting it right now. I'm writing with a friend of mine from medical school. Her name is Simi Rahman. So we're co-authoring it. So I'm very excited about that. You're not going to see it for quite a while because it's still in the plotting stages. But that's one thing I'm working on. I also have a podcast called Secular Jihadists for a Muslim Enlightenment.
Oh,
Um,
awesome.
yeah, and you should come on that at some point, because we are definitely, we are looking. I just interviewed another New York comedian recently, stand-up comic, also similar kind of background where he grew up in Houston with a Muslim family, and now he's an atheist, and he's a really really good comic.
Oh, what's his name?
So Jafar Khan,
Okay, haven't heard of him.
Jafar Khan, yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
cool.
So he's in New York now, um, and he's kind of making waves. He's coming up, and it's really good. So we've had him on the podcast. We've had a lot of great. We had Mariam Namazi, who is the Council of Ex-Muslims of Britain. We've had Sam Harris on. We've had Steven Pinker, who wrote Enlightenment Now.
Oh yeah, great guys.
Yeah, so we've had Nick Cohen, the UK journalist. So we've had a lot of really really interesting guests, and loads of sort of ex-Muslims and atheist, agnostic, secularist, liberal Muslims from around the world. Um, from Jordan, from Egypt, Saudi Arabia. We've got several people from Saudi Arabia coming on to talk about that. They talk about their issues, Bangladesh, Pakistan, everything. So it's something that I really like doing. It reaches a lot of people, and you guys should definitely check it out. I'm
Um,
promoting my podcast on your podcast, so I
hey,
should say
please do, please do.
after you download all of the episodes of God Yay or
I
yeah.
appreciate that. No, man, I would love to do your podcast, buddy. That sounds amazing. And
Yeah.
thank you so much for coming on mine.
Yeah, of course, man. It was a pleasure.